Hi everyone, thanks for being with me here today at Sevenaria University. My name is Israel Joseph. I am the founder, Dean Director, and Professor here at Sevenaria. And as I said, it's really good to have you with me here. Tonight's subject is going to be about the true and abstract, possibly, meaning behind the ancient practice of animal sacrifice. That's not a common practice anymore, except in certain religions. It still exists, actually. But we're going to learn the meaning behind that, and the possible meanings behind that, and the possible ramifications behind those meanings. And I'm going to stick with the Old Testament. There's a lot of animal sacrifice going on in that book, and I'm going to stick with that one just so there's some sort of reference point, but I will peruse other beliefs. Okay, so I just want to say thanks a lot for joining me. It's great to have you guys. Every video, I just want to really thank you for looking at the videos and joining as subscribers on YouTube, which is really cool. I appreciate it so much. Just hit that subscribe button. It's right below. It's a little red letters down there that say subscribe, and you guys can hit that. That'd be great. Also, if you want to support Sevenaria at all, we're at sevenariauniversity@gmail.com, and that's at PayPal. And so go ahead over on the PayPal, and you're free to support if you'd like to, with whatever you want to support us with. So check us out on YouTube and become a subscriber. That's really most important. Okay, I just had a few questions about support for the university. This is really most important. Just become a subscriber, and I'm glad to have you. Okay, so let's get on to our topic tonight. Tonight I'm going to talk about a more vegan approach to the Old Testament. I'm going to take the animal sacrifices of the Old Testament and relate them to cosmic events and the calendar and the movements of the sun, as opposed to what they are at face value intended for, which I'm going to discuss now. So, animal sacrifice in the Old Testament pretty much started when Cain killed Abel, and Adam and Eve were kicked out. I'm sorry. Before that, actually, when Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden, before Cain killed Abel, animal sacrifice began. That God, the El, the original contact between the atom and itself, killed animals to make skins for Adam and Eve. So this was a prophecy in the Bible about the coming times with the New Testament needing a covering for sin, as opposed to the animal covering. We would need to really become the scapegoat, so to speak. But I want to get into a little bit more psychological aspect. So, in the representation, we find Eve and Adam covered in skins of animals, fur. If you examine the astrological relationship between Adam and Eve and the sun and the moon, you can clearly see that in the ignorance that we live in today's world of the effects that the sun and the moon are having over us, that they were definitely covered in some sort of metaphysical skins of animal covering, or metaphysical cloak, if you will, that we can't understand their powers. We are unrelated to their powers, although we have a knowledge that they are there. Most people are taking them for granted and don't understand the true nature of these Mimshala, these rulers from Genesis 1:18, Genesis 1:16, Genesis 1:18. So by not taking them seriously, then they miss the subtle effects, although they have the more abrupt effects, of course, that are visible, such as be as bad as skin cancer, of course. But you get moonlight and sunny nights, sunny days. But the more subtle effects of these powers are missed, which can only be gained through meditation and through spiritual practice and through awareness. Awareness is a huge thing, and through mindfulness. All of these things are not practiced nowadays. And so the original lights have a cloak. So Adam and Eve do have a cloak over them. The moon has a cloak over her powers. She's there, but most people don't see. It's an animal cloak, and so does the sun have a cloak over its powers. Its true powers. Its true reason, which is service. See, the sun isn't there just there by happenstance. It provides light for not just us, but for all the planets in our solar system. It's the light of their world as well, not the light of this world. It's the light of the world, the light of the solar system. Without the sun, the solar system could not shine, and that's the truth of all truths. And so the sun provides light as a service. We can't see the light, of course, but light is the reason we see, right? So we have to, it's almost a level above understanding that we can't see the air, but we breathe the air. We can feel the air though, okay, but light is finite, and the sun provides it for us to live, and we know the effect of light. It comes down as particles here onto this planet after light waves are formed. The light waves contact the atmospheres of the planet, rains down as particles, contacting our upper atmosphere, coming down into us. And so the sun, having all of these powers, including the moon, sharing with the moon and the planets, have cloaks over them. Cloaks of animal skins. The skins of animals representing the lower nature of consciousness, the lower nature of psychology. So the animal skin represents our awareness, right? It is a reflection of us. So in actuality, the skins have nothing to do with God killing two animals, which is the surface level story. Adam and Eve were put out of the garden, and the Lord destroyed two animals and made skins for them. Now, a flat reading of the book would definitely give you that impression. That two animals, two furred animals, I would suppose, two large animals. I don't think he killed a squirrel, right? Two large animals were killed, and that they were made coats of fur. But in all actuality, there's a metaphysical meaning behind these books. They were written as allegory. So in allegory, you see, the animal skins represents information, intelligence, insight. You understand? Okay? So this is what I'm teaching tonight here at Sevenaria, and we're going to look at the relationship, starting with Adam and Eve, which we've just really perused and gone through. That relationship between animal sacrifice and a more metaphysical, psychological, and indeed astronomical view of this subject, as opposed to the flatline view, which is just animals are killed, blood is spilled, people are forgiven of their sins. I'm going to dig a little deeper into a more vegan interpretation of the Bible, the Old Testament, okay? If you will. Okay. So let's begin. Once again, I want to thank you guys for finding me on YouTube and signing up to my YouTube channel. So here, you can see we have a chart prepared. Okay, I have a chart here that I made, and it pretty much starts with the true meaning of animal sacrifice. Okay, and that's what we're talking about today. As you can see, I drew a little lion here with the sun on his head. He can be any kind of an animal. They didn't sacrifice animals, so it's really like a bull. I'm sorry I said a lion, but it's a bull, isn't it? So it's a bull with the sun on his head, and that's really a glyph that I created just before I presented this, which is pretty much explaining what this whole board is. And I did this board, and then I suddenly had a revelation about this glyph, which is a bull with a sun on his head, which somehow makes it into a lion. I'm not quite sure. It becomes a lion. So how about that? But anyway, we're talking about the true meaning of animal sacrifice, and let's go through the main topics of what this is. Okay. So the first bare essential meaning of animal sacrifice is the forgiveness of sins. Okay. As I said, the Creator in the Bible killed two animals and let Adam and Eve live after having eaten of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And he clothed them with these animal skins, and they were able to go out and have another child named Seth and go out and live the rest of their lives. Adam lived to almost 1,000 years old. Okay. So, these animal skins really were a sign of forgiveness that God had, as he did for Cain, put a mark on them. Okay. Now, we want to look at this from a psychological standpoint. Keep that in mind. Okay. But the bare essential understanding of animal sacrifice was for the forgiveness of sins. You sinned, and an animal paid the price for your sin. So that was called the law of sin and death. And that's what you hear about in Christianity, when in the later days they talk about the law of sin and death. Well, this is what they're talking about. There was a law of sin and death. If you sinned, something had to die. Now, it was always death. It may not have always been human death. Let me rephrase that. It was mostly death. Some of it was an offering that you would bring, but most of it was an offering of a live creature. And the creatures consisted of avian creatures, such as birds, certain kind of birds, like pigeons and doves, were what was brought. We'll talk about why pigeons and doves were brought and what they did with these, and why that's metaphysically and psychologically important, and not just important as two animals being killed. They brought goats. They brought two types of goats, actually, a goat and a scapegoat. One was killed, one was let go with the sins of the people to run into the forest, wild and free. We're gonna unpack that, as they say. We're gonna open that case and just unpack that and really explain it in a different way than it is at face value, because that's what it is. It's written as an allegory, and I'm here to teach you about this allegorical teachings. As many have taught it before me, but I'm here, and I'm going to teach it to you. And so this goat, two types of goats were brought. They brought bulls, okay, like a bull, and they brought rams, okay, adult lambs, male adult lambs or sheep of some kind, an adult sheep, a kind of goat were brought. These, and I'm going to get into human sacrifice as well, the age of human sacrifice, and why. I'm going to tell you why these things were important, why they were doing them. What is the relationship between these things and the age, the great age, the precession of the equinoxes? The precession of the equinoxes is very important to understand. The precession of the equinoxes is everything. It is the father of all the understandings. Once you understand the precession of the equinoxes, you'll understand what all of this is all about. Now, I'll just let you look over that for a minute, because we've talked about the animal sacrifice being for the forgiveness of sins at its face value. The law of sin and death. You sinned and an animal was killed. One of these various animals here was put to death, okay, by the priest on an altar where the blood flowed onto the ground. Okay, and we'll talk about the symbolism of all of that, about the altar. Okay, you'll just keep reading that about the altar, about the priest, who the priest symbolizes, what the altar symbolizes, what the blood symbolized, what the animal itself symbolized. And so you'll come away with a different understanding of the Old Testament. You'll come away that this book isn't a raw account of people dismembering animals in the temple, which it very well could be. You know, there are cultures that did that and still do that. And I am not knocking those cultures. I am a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for 34 years. I'm going to be 52 in February. And I do not approve of the killing of animals, okay? I do not approve of hurting animals or scaring animals, for that matter, or frightening them, you understand, or frightening anything, insects, or killing anything, okay? I'm not in favor of anything. But I will say that I don't knock anyone for their culture. And there are still people that are still doing that today, and including eating animals as well. And I don't knock anyone for doing what they're doing. It's up between them and the Creator. But for me, animal sacrifice is unnecessary, and I will show you a interpretation tonight of the Old Testament that will be a more animal-friendly interpretation. Okay, so let's check this out. So, as you guys can see, as I said, we're looking at the true meaning of animal sacrifice. Okay, as I said, the animals they sacrificed were bulls, rams, birds, and goats. Okay, and the birds consisted of doves and pigeons. Okay, so let's talk about a couple things first. Let's talk about Mark 14:11. Okay, that's the book of Mark in the scriptures. Mark 14:11 says, all things are done in parables. Now that is a very interesting quote. All things are done in parables. And that's the truth. All things are done in parables. It means that all things are done with a different meaning behind them. There are multiple levels of understanding the scriptures, okay? And I'm going to express one of them tonight as I see it, okay? So the first reason outside of the forgiveness of sins, which we discussed, what the face value of the sacrifices in this book are, and why they are happening, and why you can open up the Bible and read in its pages about animal sacrifice for the forgiveness of sins. But I have here as the first reason, it was really to mark as a remembrance the precession of the equinoxes. In other words, it had nothing to do with the forgiveness of sins, in that so much that the older cultures. Now I'm gonna get a lot of people angry at me probably, but please don't be angry. A man's ability to think and to rationalize and have philosophy is a gift of God. And Thoth and Hermes, they taught that this is a gift, and it's nothing I did to bargain for this gift. I woke up with this understanding, and I've listened to teachers before me. But I'll say that it's really had nothing to do with the forgiveness of sins. That these old priests just needed a good access to animals. It was a good way to get those animals in there. Now, again, I may have priests stomping around screaming heresy, but I'm not here of my own accord, right? I didn't make myself. I didn't get up one day and say, "Hey, you're going to be made today." No, same creator that described that book brought me here too. And so a lot of the priests maybe didn't understand the fullness of this after a while, and really believed that the animals were really literally supposed to be sacrificed. We went through dark ages. We went through periods of time where Jerusalem was destroyed, where other cities across the world were destroyed. I mean, gosh, since the great wars of the past, of legends of long ago, cities have been rising and falling. I believe it's the Devas and the Asuras, or the Asuras, or the Sumerian activities. These. I mean, so a lot of what we've held on to has been the remnants, if you will, of great knowledge that passed before us. Okay. So I want to continue by saying they possibly needed access to these animals, got the access. On the interior, understood that what they were really doing was not forgiving the people for sins individually. Now hear me out. That they were giving sacrifice to the God that ruled the previous ages of the blessings of those ages. And I'll say that again. I realize I'm pausing a lot because I really want this to resound. Okay, they were conducting these sacrifices as a tribute to the gods of the previous ages. In other words, the precession of the equinoxes is the 2100-year cycle of which the sun spends in an individual sign in the sidereal belt. So, if you'll indulge me, we'll just show that the sun, through what is known as the sidereal belt, it spends these sections here in the sidereal belt. They're 30 degrees. They're 30-degree arcs, okay? So you have 30 degrees, and when I say the sidereal belt, okay, we are standing on Earth. We are looking up every night at this belt, and this is what we see. So we have Aquarius, we have Pisces, we have Aries. We have the different, and we have other ones too. We have the Big Dipper, Little Dipper, and all of these guys, right? The sun goes through our calendar year, and I explained this in many videos, but I have to reiterate, in a clockwise direction. Okay, that's the calendar year, 12 months. But in its year, and it spends 30 days, right? 30, 31, 30, 29, 30, and so forth. So that makes up the year, and it's going through like February, March, April, May, on and on, right? Feb, March, April, May. Oops. But in its year, in the sun's year, you see, this is our year. This is the year it provides for us with its light. It provides this for us, right? And we have 12 months of this. But in the sun's year, guess what the sun is doing? It's not moving. It's not moving in a clockwise direction. In the sun's galactic year, it doesn't take 30 days to move through the signs. It doesn't move in a counterclockwise direction. In a clockwise direction, excuse me. It moves in a counterclockwise direction through space, space is as though it's one of those machines they created where things are spinning, things are moving, they're also turning, and they may be flipping. Space is moving in a very complicated manner. We all know this. As the sun is in its movement through space, the sun is moving in a movement such as this, and we are following behind the sun, right? We're following behind the sun. It's towing us, in other words, in its gravity. And so we're being towed by the sun in its gravity. And as it tows us forward into space, it is moving against the sidereal band. Although we are orbiting around the sun, now I have to draw these orbits because people say we're orbiting around the sun. We are orbiting around the sun, but we're also moving. So, orbiting, moving, and as the sun is moving, it is moving against the same band. See how this works? I just knocked the sun out of position. So it's moving against the same band, not as we see it in our orbits, though, right? But its orbit. And in its orbit, it spends as it moves counterclockwise, right? In its orbit, it spends 2,000 approximately. It spends approximately 2,100 years in each one of these. Okay? Follow me? 2,100 years. And so it goes. So, how do we know it's doing this? Because we're looking up and we see this. But if we're looking out to where the sun is, in the west, right? If we're looking west to find the sun on the horizon, setting. This sun sets in these guys because he is moving. We see the sun moving along the horizon. We can see the 2100 years. And you may say, how is that possible? Because the sun has 2 points of the year where it stays shining 6 hours a day. I'm sorry, it shines for 12 hours a day and goes away for at night. And whoops, I have to rewind that. I'm sorry. Let me correct myself. The sun has the equinoxes. I'll correct myself. Where it shines an even amount of time. That's what equinox means, right? That's even. On these equinoxes here. This is Aries in March, April. And this is Scorpio. Now, I'm telling you how we know the sun goes along this, what's called the precession of the equinoxes. Because every year in the equinox, the sun rises at the same time. That's one of the other qualities of equinox. Not just equal day and night, equal equinox, but it equalizes exactly at the time, the same time every day, except every year it loses 1 minute. It loses 1 minute. So every year the sun is late 1 minute on the equinox. The sun is late 1 minute on the equinox every year. Late. And because it's late, it's losing it's okay. So, and this 1 minute, 1 minute late every 70 years equals to 1 degree. Okay? So 1 minute late every 70 years equals to 1 degree. Back. Fall back. So 70 years ago, when this guy was looking at the horizon, the sun was at this point. But every year on the equinox, the sun was late, 1 minute. And then 70 years later, suddenly the sun is here. Get it? So when the first people were looking at the sun over here, after 70 years, the sun was here. And it ticked all these ticks. And people have been monitoring this and doing mathematics, and it will continue ticking these ticks of time. And people have monitored these ticks from time memorial and have done mathematics about the future of these ticks, about the future of these indications, where the sun will be in the year 5,986. They know because of these, they know the sun. If the sun continues just being 1 minute late, then they can project what time he'll be at work in 5,226. This is, and they will know what, and now it goes a little further. This means that the sun is changing these 30-degree, some of you might have figured this out already. It's changing. It's moving like a guy through a movie. This is like the movie projector. Here is Aquarius. We won't start that close because we're in Aquarius. So here is Cancer, way back in time. Gemini, Taurus, Aries, Pisces. You know, I'm putting the sun going into Jesus's time right now. So this is the sun entering into Pisces, you know. But right now the sun is here. He's entered into Aquarius. And so has his brother Uranus. They've come together. And so this is how we also know what age we're in. We're in the age of Aquarius. Because the sun is the guide. Everything is about the sun. The sun is the light giver. He's the life giver. He is the light giver. He is the light of the world. He is the provider. It is, and you say he because the earth is the mother. It delivers the seed, the semen. The semen is light. The sun's semen is, remember that, earth is the mother. He's father. You see why it's mother and father. It's not really like male and female. Just that light bears life. And in our world, we just kind of balance it out because the father has the semen, the mother bears the child. In traditional speak. Today, I'm probably getting to the point of people throwing stones at their computers in this PC world. But that's the way it is. Some generations are different than others. So the sun is moving along this track, and this track, as I said, is above our heads, and it's called the Sidereal Band. It contains the constellations which we name the zodiac from, and the sun moves through this. It moves through it in a counterclockwise way. Okay? Counterclockwise. Whereas in our year, it's moving this way. Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Virgo, on and on and on until it gets all the way to the bottom. Capricorn, it comes back up Aquarius, right? Pisces, it keeps going round and round. That's that circle. That's him. But from the sun's point of view on the horizon, it's moving this way, and it's going very slowly. It's going very slow. Okay? So this is called the precession of the equinoxes. Okay? Okay? I'm just going to let you look at that because this is the yearly. So I'm just going to let you study that for a minute. Okay? He's late 1 minute. Late 1 minute late every 70 years equals to 1 degree fallback. 1 degree. So the sun is late every day on the equinox. Every time in March and April when you do the Passover, that's why it's important because he's passing over these things. First of all, here he's passing over the lines of the year and he's passing over here. Okay, so this is super important to understand. And the reason now you would want to understand this in reference to the true meaning of animal sacrifice, precession of the equinoxes, every 2100 years, is because every 2100 years, the sun, as I said, spends in a particular sign. And these particular signs are things. They are creatures. They're described as creatures. Why? Why? We all know why. Because the Taurus, the bull, has a feature, okay, Taurus the bull.
According to Wikipedia.
Right, we'll look up the star cluster Taurus the bull, and if you look at it, the ancients took this star cluster. Okay, we'll just look at this. The ancients took that and they created down on the bottom here, you know, gave it some horns. It's a bull going through the sky. Okay? So, follow me. This is really not hard to understand. If you just check it, like if you just really look at what I'm saying, if you really keep in mind that the sun is the boss, okay, keep this in mind. This is super important to keep in mind to understand all of what I'm saying to you. Because what happens is, if the sun is the boss, the sun has to rule from a position. He has to have a glorified point where he can direct as a boss, right? I mean, in a traditional way. Today, bosses aren't like that. But in a traditional sense, he has to have a place where where the sun can dictate from, okay? So that's what they said these were. So understand this. These were called the house of the sun. Now, you know, like you have the house of the rising sun. That's what this is. When the sun is rising, the sign, as I said, it moves along this track, this way. So the sign, this is the guy looking at its setting. But let's change it to the guy looking at its setting, because it's east or west. If you're looking at it from the east, the sun is rising in a certain sign. It's rising in one of these graphs or between one of these, I'm sorry, not graphs, one of these sections, or between one of these sections, it's rising. It's rising. If you're looking at the ocean to the east, it's rising in one of, that's the house. That's the house. Okay? These are houses. Do you understand why that makes sense? Because the sun, for its path through the sky, lives in this house. And as it's moving in the precession of the equinoxes, he's still living in this house for 2100 years. And as he moves through the equinoxes, he moves to the moving out of house now. He's leaving. He's moving out of his house. And to the ancients, this position here was super crazy because they wondered what's happening. Why is the sun not only changing houses in the morning time, his morning house, his winter home, and in his summer home, he's changing houses too? Why? Why is this happening? This was a great mystery to him. But he keeps changing and changing and changing and going all the way through the houses in the zodiac. And they could see it happening. Not only this way throughout the year, as I said, but they could see it going this way, which was a mystery to them. So there we go. He's living in the house of, let's put him in the house of Pisces. Just entered the house of Pisces on the precession of the equinoxes. If he'd entered the house of Pisces here, it would have been here because he's going this way. See, he's coming out of the month of February. But let's say he's on his 2100 year cycle. He's entered this way because he's going counterclockwise. Just entered the house of Pisces. Okay? So the ancients, let's take him back because that's Jesus' time. He just entered the house of Aries. Because in Jesus' time, the animal sacrifices would end, and I'll tell you why. He entered the house of Aries. The people, the priests, now that's who we're talking about, right? The guys who were sacrificing animals were priests. The priests would see this as auspicious because the day, the very year, down to the, I told you there were these ticks of how long he spent here, 2100 year ticks. The very day that he crossed into the other sign was really, that the sun crossed into the other sign was super important. The day of the year of this and the year of this, the longest, auspicious, because there were two 0 point energy happening here. The gods were changing hands. It was zero energy. You know when you're clocking out at work and the other person's coming in and there's kind of like no one manning, but there is, but there isn't, and you kind of getting the apron on and the other one's kind of taking the apron off? This is where we're at here. It's actually where we're at right now in the age of Aquarius. We're at this point right now in 0 point energy. That's why everything's crazy, because it's kind of apron on, apron off. Pisces going out, clocking out, and Aquarius just born. Can you imagine? Not even going to work yet, just born. So once the new age is born, the old age clocks out. You know the old baby new year, with the big ears. Once the child is born, the old year goes out, and the new year is not even active yet. So we're in, hold on for the tribulation of this Armageddon in the skies. But anyway, they would see this as really super important, and based on what I just explained, they were fearful. Now, as I said, when they looked up, they saw animals. Okay, so they looked up and they saw in the sky fish, shapes, a shape like a ram, and a shape like a bull in the stars, in the house. Okay? Okay? So they saw these guys in the sky, and they were animal shapes. They said, wow, the sun is living in a forest, like a animal inhabited world, where he's moving through the sky, and he's in with the bulls. He's in with a bull. Well, first of all, they were observing the year, right? And they were like, he's in with a fish, and then he in March, April goes with the ram, something that looks like a ram in the sky. And then he goes with something that looks like a bull. And then he goes with something that looks like two people, but two twins, two boys. And then something that looks like a crab, Cancer. Oh my God, the sun is moving through this place that's very strange. Up here, they notice the same thing. Oh, he's in the... But see, the sun didn't spend much time in these houses when he was going through. He just spent 30 days, as I said, 31 days, 30 days, 29 days, 30 days. Up here, though, he spent eons, longer than anyone could live. 2,100 years. 2,100 years. 2,100 years. And by the way, this took a total of 2,000 okay, approximately. These are all approximate numbers, okay? So understand that the approximation has to be, because we're human beings. These numbers start getting so big, it's almost like, the creation doesn't want us to figure this out, but we gotta try, right? And so they watched the sun going through for 2,100 years through these houses. He's in the house with the bull. Oh, now he's in the house with the ram. Curious. 2,100 years. He's in the house with Pisces. And it was serious to them. And I can tell you that there is a direct relationship. If you look at the sort of worship that was going on, and this is my point, this is my whole thesis here, that there's a direct relationship between the types of animals they were sacrificing and where the sun was in his house. Not in the year so much. Maybe, yes, on a lower level we'll discuss about that. So not so much about the sins of people, this is your forgiveness of sins, but to celebrate the sun. To, as I said here, to literally recreate the sun, a god on earth, to recreate the sun on earth, was the animal sacrifice in order to celebrate the sun's position. So when the sun was in the age of Taurus, the bull, if we do our 2,100 year cycles, that's 4,200 BC. That age began in 4,200 BC if we look at our 2,100 year cycles. And if you look at the period between here and here, you will see a whole lot of bull worship. You're going to see a whole lot of Babylonian bulls, Babel bulls, bulls that came as the worshipped animals with wings. And the wings signify that they were the bull, known as the bull of heaven. Bull of heaven. Okay, there was the Lamb of God and the bull of heaven. Did you know about the bull of heaven? This is the bull of heaven, Taurus. Now there's a story of Gilgamesh where he fights the bull with Enkidu. He's changing the age. Gilgamesh is the sun. He's changing the age. Enkidu is his animal power that the earth gave him. They are both going to change the age. He fights Taurus. So we can tell where Gilgamesh was written. Gilgamesh was written in the beginning of Aries, which was 2100 BC. So Sevenaria has just taught you when Gilgamesh was written. 2100 BC. Gilgamesh was written 4,100 approximately years ago. Because we know, because Gilgamesh has to kill the bull of heaven. Taurus the bull. Okay? So that's how you have to look at these stories. And I'm teaching you here at Sevenaria that they were celebrating Taurus the bull all the while in these 2,000 years here with sacrifices of bulls. And that's what it was. That they were saying, hey, this is for the forgiveness of sins. Now, there were other sacrifices going of other animals because they were anticipating other ages coming. So when they sacrificed rams in the age of Taurus, and they sacrificed the birds, they were anticipating the other ages. Again, I'm skipping Pisces again because you probably can figure out why I'm skipping Pisces, but I'm not gonna get to that just yet. So they were sacrificing before Aries, rams, of course. You find rams, but mostly you find these bulls with wings, huge granite bulls all over the ancient world. And it's amazing. So it is directly related to the heavens. And as the sun progressed through and made its way into Aries 2100 years later, they began sacrificing rams, which Aries is the age of Moses. Age of Abraham. Oops. And oh, did I say Abraham? I was right. I'm sorry. This is a lot of information. I'm sorry. I was right at first. Aries is the age of Moses. And in Moses' time, where did Moses hang out? Where did he grow up? In Egypt. And when you go to Egypt, the predominant creature that is worshipped is the ram. All along one of the roads there's a whole head of statues of rams leading all the way up to certain temples. Rams were constantly sacrificed in Egypt. And there again is my point. The animal sacrifice was not about originally about the animal or the sin, but actually the psychological and metaphysical meaning behind it in relation to where the sun was, in relation to man's psychology, his the effect on the mind. So in the age of Aries, Egypt, we can safely say that this is Egypt. There were rams sacrificed. We can safely say that this was Uruk, where was Taurus. And then we move on to Pisces, the age of Jesus. So where the sacrifices stop. Why? Look why. Can you figure it out? I'll give you a second to answer in the comments. The sacrifices were, again, because the age the sun was in its precession. 2100 years in Taurus, the bull, they sacrificed bulls. Moving on, 2100 years in Aries, the ram, they sacrificed rams. 2100 years in Pisces, which we just spent, because remember, this is 0 up here. There's a lot going on now. 0, 0, 0, 0. That looks like the Olympics, doesn't it? when JC was born. So that's 2,000 years. 2,100 years. That brings us to 20, approximately, let's say 2030. 2,000. We're doing approximations here. So we're talking about the year 2000. So in the year 000 to the year 2000, there have been no sacrifices. And there's a talk about rebuilding the temple here to rebuild the site, but you're not supposed to. Because why? Why aren't you supposed to do this? Because the sun has gone out of Pisces. Listen, the reason we haven't had, and I'm going to get to this, I told you, the sacrifices were for the animals in the sky because the sun lived in their house. This is what I didn't tell you. They were honoring the house of the sun. They were giving honor. So they were giving honor to the house of the sun by sacrificing. As the sun moved, they changed the type of animal they sacrificed. Okay? I'm going to say that again. They were giving honor. Super, super important to the point we're making here. And as you guys know, I am speaking from the Force. So I am giving it to you as the Force is giving it to me. But the Force has already shown me the reasoning behind what I'm saying. And the end reasoning is amazing if you think about it. So they were giving honor to the house of the sun, where the sun was, what house he was in. So when he was in Taurus, they were sacrificing bulls, giving honor to bulls. When the sun started being in the house of Aries, they were sacrificing rams, giving honor to rams, showing the sun that we too are understanding where you are. You're in the house of Aries, we're going to sacrifice rams. We understand where you are. You're in the house of Taurus, we're going to do bulls. We see you, son. We're aware of you. We see you. Hi. That's what that was about. When they got to Jesus, though, Jesus was a proponent of ending all the sacrifice. He said he was going to destroy the temple. Many people don't understand what that means. Well, there is a meaning to it, both a high cosmological meaning and a metaphysical meaning and a physical meaning. First, let's deal with the physical meaning. The Romans came in 70 AD and destroyed the temple, the second temple that was built. And that has not been built ever since. So there was a temple in Solomon's time that was ruined by the Babylonians. Before that, the ark was taken to Ethiopia. And then they built a temple in 300 BC, which was destroyed in 70 AD by the invading Romans. And so that is the face value of that temple being destroyed and sacrifices going away. But I'll tell you why the real reason sacrifices have gone away. The real reason sacrifices went away for 2,000 years, my friends, is because there are no laws concerning the sacrifice of fish. Now you may say, what? And you're rightfully so. But let me say that again. Read the books of the old school and show me the laws where you are to sacrifice fish. Very hard to find, if at all. Hardly any that I know of. What was the first thing Christ asked for when he returned from the dead? Give me a piece of fish. He opened the age of Pisces. However, there are no sacrifices in Pisces, are there? No, they're not. Why? Because in none of these scrolls and papers and documents did they have an imagination that we would make it to Pisces. They thought the world was going to end here. Every time the sun changed houses, they thought it was the end of the world. That's why we have this 2,000 year end of the world psychology. Every 2,000 years, the world's going to end, isn't it? But no, it's every 2,000 years, the sun's house is going to change. They sacrificed bulls because of Taurus. He was in the house of Taurus. They gave bulls. The sun, the provider, moved to the house of Aries. They gave rams. They never imagined we'd make it past Aries. Why? Why could this be? Because Aries in the yearly calendar breaks the cycle of winter. So as the sun is moving through Aries, he's passed over. This is Passover. That's Passover. I'm sorry, you can't see that red marker, and I'm going to have to take a chill for a minute and write it in something else, since it's hard to see. Okay? Because that orange is not easy. But this is Passover. Right here. When the sun is going through from Aries into Taurus, we're in Passover. Okay? This time of the year is the Passover. Isn't that crazy? Why is that? Why is that? Because at this time of the year, the sun is rise. There is a point in the sky that the sun. I'll explain it to you. If you're looking south in the winter, you'll see the sun rising, but way down south. It won't rise high in the sky at all. It'll rise above the horizon and set. In the summertime, in the extreme end of it, let's say in July as opposed to December, January, you'll see the sun over your head. The sun will be rising from the east and going over your head. In the winter, it's down south. Observe that. It's super important. The difference between here and here is this arc and the arc of this part. And there's imaginary lines drawn on these arcs. I'm using my arm as a display. So the arc of the winter is one line. If you can imagine a circumference line moving from my hand, the arc of the equator is another line, and the highest point that the sun can reach to, which you can't see my hand, is another line. So there are three major lines in the sky. Okay? Follow me so far? So as you're looking south, you need to look south to see this. You see one set of lines here, another set of lines here, and one set of lines here was called the Tropic of Cancer in the south, when the sun is in December. The one up here, all the way at the extreme, not the middle, but the top, is called the Tropic of Capricorn. Oops, I must be tired. I was just seeing if you were paying attention. The line up top here is actually called the Tropic of Cancer. The line here is called the Tropic of Capricorn. So let's state that again. When the sun is in its southernmost part of the sky in December, the line furthest to the south is called the Tropic of Capricorn, just like the sign in December. The Tropic of the Goat, because Capricorn is a goat. And when it's rising, it gets to, in March, April, another line, as I said. This is the midpoint. Then there is the highest line in July it gets to, which it cannot go any further north. It has to now start progressing back south. This highest line is known as the Tropic of Cancer. So you have the Tropic of Capricorn and Tropic of Cancer. The midpoint, which is important to this Passover point, which took a while to make, and I'm sorry about that, is called the equator. This is where we get the equator from. So you have the Tropic of Cancer, you have the southernmost point, which is the Tropic of Capricorn, and in the middle is the equator, or somewhere in the middle. And when the sun passes over this point in the sky, we call that Passover, because everything from this point to the top point is summer and fun and great. So we celebrate that. So there is one point in the south. One point in the south called the Tropic of Cancer. Tropic of Capricorn. Sorry. Tropic of Capricorn. There's one point in the north that the sun gets to called the Tropic of Cancer. And then there's the equator. These three lines. Okay? Now you have to remember that. So when the sun rises through these various places, he's passing over. This is the Passover. Because now it's going to go for summer. It's going to begin its summer path. You see how that works? So we have the Passover here. Okay, again. We have the Passover. Again. The Passover celebration is killing a lamb. The Passover lamb, a lamb. And in the original Passover in Exodus, the Passover was happening over their heads. The angel of the Lord was passing through, was passing over. That's literally what it means, in the Bible anyway, that the angel of the Lord passed over the Israelites, didn't choose them. It means not choosing. The angel of the Lord came through to kill the firstborn of the Egyptians who were in the story persecuting the Israelites. We know this is metaphysical. The Egyptians represent predominant thoughts. The Israelites represent thoughts from the right hemisphere of the brain. But the angel of the Lord came through to slay and passed over, or did not choose, the Israelites. That's what we get the word Passover from. They were passed over. The lamb's blood was painted on their door and they were passed over. They were painting lamb's blood because there was a Passover. Aries was passing over. The sun was passing into Aries. For the book of Exodus is describing the very passing of the sun from Taurus to Aries. It's not just describing higher and lower thoughts of the psychology. It is describing what I'm talking about. The passing of the sun from the bull to the ram. Hence Michelangelo sculpts Moses with horns on his head, little baby horns. Why didn't he sculpt the huge ram horns to show him what a huge ram, muscular ram? Because he was just a newborn son. He was the new baby ram coming in. Had he been closer to Jesus, right? Jesus is a fish because he's Pisces. Have you seen the carvings or the moldings or the paintings of the image, the hieroglyph for Jesus? It's a fish. It's the Pisces fish. Look at the hieroglyph for the zodiac, and Jesus is the same thing because it's the fish of heaven. So Moses was a baby ram, and he was the son. Moses is the son. He's not a man. He's the son changing the house. From bull to ram. So we have this Passover in the sky, and Aries is the lamb that has to be burnt. Aries, when the sun, my original point, which I do tangentize to coin a term a bit, but as the sun comes up out of winter and passes the equator, it's called Passover. Passover happens to be at the exact point where we have a little ram, a little sacrificial lamb, the baby horned animal, put it that way, is sacrificed just as the sun burns up Aries the ram. After it is burned, the sun proceeds in the year to Taurus. Do you see this point? The sun burns Aries the ram. It burns him up. He passes him in the year. I'm not talking about the precession of the equinoxes right now. I'm talking about the yearly calendar now. In the yearly calendar, the sun moves from Pisces into Aries to begin spring. And when he springs out of Aries, when he jumps out of Aries, he burns the ram. There's no more Aries. He's done. Forget it. He's in Taurus now. Now he's going to Gemini. Right? Where's the ram? The ram's gone. Now he's jumping over to Cancer. And he's going over to Leo. Then he's going to go to Virgo. And he's going to go over to Libra. And so he goes, right? He's done with the ram. Why? He burned the ram. The sun, the creator, burned the ram. And this is what the true meaning of Aries the ram is. This is what you're talking about. When you're talking about Aries the ram, you're talking about the sun burning the ram up of Aries. And so the sacrifice now, my point is that the true meaning of animal sacrifice, one of them was to mark the precession of the equinoxes, and I think that I just pretty much proved that in these parts, they sacrificed as the sun was in Taurus, was bull, sun was in Aries, was rams. And this was why they thought they would. Now, this is my point. Why were there no scriptures written about sacrificing fish? Because we haven't had sacrifices done in the last 2,000 years for this Abrahamic faith that started way back here. Why were there no fish sacrifices? What's with the fish? What's with the temple going away, destroyed? And why wasn't there a whole bunch of fish sacrifice? Well, I'll tell you why. Because there were no laws written for fish sacrifice, because these people never thought we would make it past Aries. I'll say that again. There were no laws written for fish sacrifice. And in Pisces, the age of Pisces, the 2,000 years we just spent, because these people taught once Jesus came and Zoroaster produced, a priest of Zoroaster predicted Jesus because he was looking at the stars, and they came into Israel and they found this kid and they said, hey, you are the Messiah. Now, they thought when this man was born, it was the end of the world because the sun was going into its cosmic springtime, its cosmic Passover. And just like us, when we go into our Passover, I hope you guys are following me on this. Just like us on earth in the year, when we go into our Passover, we have a time where we are being provided for. We are no longer in winter, right? And now the sun is just blessing us, right? It's showering us with sunlight and provisions. We thought, well, the ancients thought, once it passes this 2100 years of Aries and it does the Passover of itself, not of us, it will no longer be having to work. It will no longer have to work. So we don't have to worry about sacrificing. We probably won't even be around here. This is what they thought. They thought after Aries, the sun is going to quit. He's going to check out just like the gods check out. And he's going to go away. And it'll be the end of the world. They thought it was going to be the end of the world. And because they thought it was going to be the end, they never made provisions to sacrifice fish. You follow me? Sacrifice bulls. Sacrifice the Aries. They thought after Aries the sun's going to quit. He's quitting and he's going home. He's not at work anymore. He's got to have his Passover celebration. And they thought the sun was going to be quit in this age of 000 to 2000 till our time. I'm talking about our time. This is Rome. This is Greece. This is Rome. This is the Gothic Wars. This is the Muslims invading Spain. This is Spain. This is England. This is Portugal, Denmark. This is the Americas. Everything up until 2020. This is the time I'm talking about. And the sun during that time was in the house of Pisces. So we lived. People thought it was the end of the world. That's why they thought Jesus was coming for the end of the world. They thought, man, ride into Jerusalem and destroy it. He said, the kingdom comes not by sight. An evil generation seeks after a sign. The kingdom of God is inside of you. He said, what are you looking for? He's like, you guys are tripping. This is like not it's what I'm teaching tonight. This is about the light. This is not about physical revolution. This is not about a physical happening. This is about the light in you. And this is what Jesus was teaching too, the light. Okay? So when the light changes, they thought they would never survive, these priests before Christ. But Jesus came to tell you you are going to survive. So isn't that amazing? That's what Christ came to tell you. I won't say Jesus, but I'll say Christ. Christ, the Son, the light came from the sky and said, you will survive. I'll give you another chance. I'm going to stay at work. You need me at work, don't you? You need me at work overtime. Got you. I'm going to break my own Passover. Why? Because I love you. Why? Because it's all spiritual anyway. And I love you. And I'm going to do this because you need me at work. Stayed at work through Pisces. What are we going to do? We got to fish. We got to fish. We don't know laws. No laws. What are the fishy laws? No fishy laws. The Egyptians told us the fish are a different consciousness. We shouldn't even eat them. We shouldn't touch them. They live in water. It's a different consciousness. What do we do? Well, the temple was destroyed. You can't do anything. You can't sacrifice bulls anymore. And say it's for the forgiveness of sins. It's done. You can't do Aries anymore. Rams. Because now you're in, the sun is living with the fish. The sun is underwater. What? That's not even supposed to happen. How is the sun living with the fish? See why they, all of this is why they thought that's going to be the end of time, because the sun doesn't go underwater to live with fish. The fish don't live with the sun. That's like pigs flying. It's like you get the expression when pigs fly. When the sun lives with fish. That's a good one. We should reinvent that. When the sun comes and lives in the ocean. That's why they thought it's the end of the world. But it wasn't. But Jesus came and said, this Christ came and said, no, it's not the end of the world. It's the end of your dependency on these crazy stuff. I'll say that again. He said it's not the end of the world. It's the end of your dependency on this crazy stuff. It's the end of you depending on fearing these guys and where I'm at. I'm no longer in their houses. It's cool when I was in the house of Taurus, you guys were, hey, Taurus, oh, you got in the house of Aries, oh, Aries, Rams, everybody. But now I'm no longer in the houses. I have nothing to do with these guys anymore. And I gave you no laws for Pisces. Why? Because I ain't got no problems with the fish. The fish can swim. They're all good with me. I live in the ocean now. I'm far away from you. I'm over the ocean. So for 2,000 years, we couldn't sacrifice because there's no sacrificial law for fish. Simple as that. It has nothing to do with the forgiveness of sins. It has to do with where the sun is. And now we're in the age of Aquarius, the son of man. Because the sun passed over in 2012. His galactic equator. He passed over again. Now you see human sacrifice. People talking about drinking babies and all. It's conspiracy theories. Yeah, you don't know if it's really happening, but just the talk of that bubbling back to the surface. Why? Because there's a man there. There's a man in the sky now. It's horrid. It's horrific. It needs to stop. So this is really the reason for the sacrifice of animals on a level. Okay, the type of star system, the type of star cluster that was in the sky at the time, and where the sun was in there. Now take a look at that for a minute. All you have to remember to solve this whole equation is the sun is the boss. That's all you have to remember. If you remember that, then you'll see everything and why they did these sacrifices. Okay? Okay, great. That went pretty well. I think you guys can pretty much guess all it, get all this. Sun's moving, man. He's moving. This and this are the same. All right, so let's move on. The second reason for animal sacrifice, the changing of the seasons. I've already discussed in the previous board that the sun has a seasonal change. Okay, we already discussed that the sun has a seasonal change about it, and we're going to talk about the importance of this seasonal change by drawing a graph. Okay, I'm going to use something I invented actually. I call it the circulator. It helps me to draw a perfect circle. Some people are not too keen about that, but I also use it. I've attached some levels as well here so I can mark the exact points in order to draw a pretty much leveled out field to create the wheel the wheel. You see, each one of these has a level. Okay? So, not too much of a big deal. I just use this to help me out. And that's it. Just pull it right off. So, you can see these little. Okay? You know, donations and stuff gets you one of those as well. Okay? You're going to see what I use it for. If you don't mind, I'm turning my back to the camera, okay? Now, what I'm going to be talking about is what is called the Wheel of the Zodiac, and I'm going to explain as well what this wheel is and why it's super important. Because this is how you will understand the secondary part of the thesis tonight, so to speak, which is the marking of what are known as the 4 cardinal points. The 4 cardinal, that's cardinal points. Okay? Now, if you've noticed, cardinal is also the name of a high official in church. And so is deacon. Right? Well, these are the names of the position of stars as well. So, with this, you can see that we have a graph laid out before you. Okay? And this graph is really pretty much the yearly calendar. Okay? And so I'm going to go ahead and tell you how the sun pretty much makes its way around this and why it's important. These are your important positions. This is the spring equinox. And this is the fall equinox. Spring and fall. This is the winter solstice. This is the summer. Summer have 2 M's? No. Okay? So that's pretty much, this happens. Okay, ready? December 22nd, approximately, every year. Okay? And the date of the spring equinox approximately every year. The date of summer solstice. Every year. And the date of the fall equinox. Every year. So the date of the December equinox is super important, okay? And I did make an error in that I'm sorry, I have to apologize for my error. Oops. So December 21st is when the sun spends the shortest time in the sky. Right there. June 21st is the longest. So this is the shortest. Four to 6 hours, depending on where you are. And this is the longest. 12 hours. So you can see that there's a distinct difference between those two. And the ancients observed that. Now, how many hours does the spring equinox last? Actually, the sun lasts longer than 12 hours here. Okay? How long does the sun stay in the sky in the summer solstice? And, you know, that is much longer than 12 hours. We're looking at sometimes around 16 hours. In the spring equinox, it spends 12 hours and then 12 hours of day and then 12 of night. Here it spends 12 of day, 12 of night. So you can see you know, the length of hours that the sun spends in the winter solstice is way different than the amount of hours the sun spends in the summer solstice. We're talking the difference between 4 to 6 and 16 hours. That's insane. And then it curiously spends an even amount of time here in the day and at night here, and in the fall in the day and at night. And here is where we celebrate Passover. That's Passover every year in March. Okay? So this is Capricorn. This is Aquarius. And I put them in the middle because they are in the middle of the months. And this is Aries. Ram's horn breaking through. Breaking through that equator. This is the equator. This represents that line in the sky that I was telling you about. Whoops, we got rid of that. This represents that. I was telling you about those three individual spots in the sky. There's the lowest point of the year, which is down here. It's the Tropic of Capricorn, the highest point of the Tropic of Cancer. And then here is the equator. So in the sky, we drawing this as a line. This would be the equator. So when the sun passes this point into March, it breaks through, it passes over the equator. Okay, so this is the Tropic of Cancer. Tropic of Capricorn. December, January. Now, how do we get to this point of understanding here? How did this graph come along? Well, this graph is based on an idea that the Earth, if you have a globe, that the sun, if you have a particular landmass here and another one here, that the sun is shining south in the winter and north in the summer, just like it is here. And then there were these infinitesimal lines between the 2 points. It made it what it was. And as I said, right down the middle, they drew the equator. You can draw the equator. So you've got 3 independent lines. You've got the 2 tropics and the equator. Now, that is a hard graph to understand if you're showing the west and the north, or the equals to summer equals to winter. You're showing the south. You're showing the south and the north. That's a pretty hard graph to dig if you're trying to show the sun. So what you can do is, if you're trying to show how the sun rises and falls through this graph, then basically all you need to do is draw a line put a dot at each place it spends time. So now you've got dots instead of lines. So you can get rid of your lines, because now you've just made a dot for every year, for every month. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we can use 2 more, can't we? So those are the dots, and you can now get rid of these lines and have a more readable graph instead of a line graph. Now you can see the sun in a more readable way, of the way the sun is moving. And now, instead of drawing dots, the sun rising, the sun getting to the Tropic of Cancer, and then going back down again, getting to the Tropic of Capricorn, and then rising again, you can make this into a solid line. You can make that into a solid line. And there you have a wave, and that's called a sine wave. A sine wave, or a sinusoidal sinusoidal wave, but a sine wave for short. And this represents the sun in winter, in spring, sun in summer, winter, spring. See how that works? So you have the sun in spring, rising to summer, going down to winter, and then going back up to spring again. Follow me so far on that? So if you can look at what we've drawn here, if you can look at what we've drawn here, in the summertime, the sun is at a high point. The sun's at a high point. Here, the sun's here. It's at a low point here. And then he's back to the same position here. All along the earth. Okay? So then what you can do is you can find the midpoint to this graph, which is this line here, called the equator, where the sun is basically in the middle of the planet, because we're looking at the planet. Keep that in mind. We're looking at the planet. And we're looking at countries. So what you can basically do then is you can draw a line that suits the point that the equator should be found, which is here. I've just found the equator. Then you can draw the Tropic of Cancer. Then you can draw the Tropic of Capricorn. See what I've done? So now you can connect these boxes here and have a graph. A graph that gives you the sun in spring. Now what you have to do with this graph is something really clever. You have to kind of figure out, because now you're back to this point again. Now you're back to showing, if you want to name where the sun is, then you have to show a lot of dots. Thousands of dots, or you can make lines again. You don't want to do that. Alright? So they cleverly, this is clever. What they said they could do was then look at this, not as a graph, but as a three-dimensional object. So let's get rid of our old model here. So now they took this basic thing and said, let's just make a shape out of it. And so they made a shape. And they said, let's connect this shape. And so they did what they did on that board there. They connected the shape. We said, well, that's That's clever, because to some people, that looks as though you can just take this part and put it in the background. So you have something that looks more like this. That's kind of far away from it, receding. He said, and if you twist this enough, if you twist it, say, to the right enough, or to the left enough, or to the right, whichever, if you take it and you turn it enough, or I'm sorry, if you take it and you turn it enough, you can actually turn it into a circle. So what they did was what you can do with any line. They took the line and they basically turned it, the wave. And what they ended up with when they turned it was a vision that this half, this point, had attached itself to this point. They turned it, and suddenly they lined this point up here with this point. And so they had a straight line going back. And what this did for them was they turned it into a shape like this. So they were then able to see these 2 points not as a random shape, but as 2 set points in a circle. And they were also able to see these 2 points as 2 set points in a circle. And there they had a great little graph. And the more information they fed this graph is the rounder this graph got. So what you're looking at here in this graph I've drawn, this point and this point, are this point and this point. This point and this point are this point and this point. This one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, this one, that one, this one, that one. So instead of having to show the winter, and again, this one, that one is this and that. The spring, the fall and spring equinoxes are shown. So instead of having to draw a map, instead of having to draw a line over the map, and then paint a bunch of suns, and paint a bunch of little suns, and then draw a bunch of little lines showing the names of the months that go, forget it. They had a genius idea. They took this solid piece of information here, right, this solid bar, and they turned it, they took it here, and they turned it on its angle and saw it as connecting points and made a circle. Genius. So after they did that, they were able to see then these points in a circle. So they were able to lay out the hours and everything else. Now, the sun then, that's how you got to this circle. Okay, so I really just wanted to explain to you guys, if any of you were confused out there about how this is the sun, how it represents the path of the sun, I just showed you. We went from a map of the earth and the way the sun rises and gets to its highest point in the summer and then fades off again. This is all happening like this. You can't draw 1,000 lines, so they drew 4 main points and they turned it into a graph and then divided that up into 12 calendar months. These are the 12 calendar months. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And that's what they divided it up into. So these are the months of the year. This is January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January. Right? Whoops. Okay. So see how that works out? That is how it is. And when the sun is in July, it is called the Lion of Judah because it's in its hottest month. So the ancients watched the sun move around this like this. Okay, this whole thing until they do what they did. So now they're able to watch it like a television throughout the year. So it moves all throughout the year. So here we go. And this is also the four Gospels of Jesus. But I'm explaining to you the sacrifices. So we're going to get to that. So it moves out of December. Here goes your first sacrifices. The winter sacrifices. Right? Then you have the Passover sacrifice, where it comes out of March, matching exactly with the Passover sacrifices. Then you have the sacrifices during the season of the summer season. Then you have your season-ending sacrifices, and then you back again to the winter, where there are few sacrifices, and most of the sacrifice you're doing is yourself. So we have a ram being sacrificed in the month of Aries as the Passover lamb. Okay? We have the sun as the king in the month of July, and he is Leo, the lion, that does not get sacrificed, but we ourselves are paying the sacrificial price again as we do in the winter. He is too hot to work in. It's too hot to work. He's in Leo. He's in July. Here we have more sacrifices, except these sacrifices are announcing the beginning of the harvest season or the end of the harvest season, depending on which crop you're sowing. And here we have sacrifices, as I said, that people make in the winter. And so we can see that there are appropriate creatures along the way. The goat is a scapegoat. He's in the winter. Capricorn is a goat. He escapes. There are no sacrifices in the winter don't happen, except for what we're doing ourselves. And so this is the crux of the second part, the changing of the seasons. The true meaning of animal sacrifice was more than the forgiveness of sins. We're talking about the changing of seasons. Because if you look at it, there are sacrifices all through that match these points in the seasons. There's no sacrifices in the winter. There's sacrifices at the harvest and the end of harvest. No sacrifices in the summer. And it's a lion. You don't sacrifice lions, right? You don't cut up lions. It's a lion. And there's a sacrifice of a little horned furry creature in Passover when the sun passes and the little horned furry creatures start multiplying. We start having babies. It's a good sign. So it's a Passover. And there's a sacrifice of a small horned furry creature. Okay? So that's pretty much the point regarding the animal sacrifices being in relation to the changing of the seasons. Now, as I said, there's a, I think I covered this already, that, there's a relationship between the animal and the sacrifice they're doing in the yearly sacrifices, as there was in the sacrifice of the equinoxes. In the sacrifice of the equinoxes, in Abraham's time, they sacrificed bulls. In Moses' time, they sacrificed rams. Why? Because the son was in the house of the ram, the bull in the house of ram. In Jesus was the scapegoat. They did not sacrifice goats, but he represents the scapegoat. No fish sacrifice, and we represent the Lamb of God, which are the clean and high thoughts of God. So, just as it was related to where the sun was in position with the sky, the sacrifices and the changing of the seasons is related to where the sun is in the position of the sky in the year. Okay, in accordance with where it is what gets sacrificed. Now, I'll make a quick point about human sacrifice and why that even started. And you can probably guess why. If rams were sacrificed in the year before Pisces, in the sun's year, the 2100 years before Pisces, because rams were in the sky, and if bulls were sacrificed then what do you think was sacrificed in the age of Gemini in 6300 BC? Gemini are boys, 2 people. 2 kids, actually. 6300 BC and before, there was human sacrifice. Well, no, I'm sorry. 6300 BC and after, until the time of Taurus the bull, when it stopped. This is why human sacrifice is so looked down upon, because it stopped. It was the end of that age. Had we been born into the age of Noah, which is why the flood happened, since Noah lived in the age of Gemini, we would have been seeing some horrible things. And one of those horrible things would have been child sacrifice. That is because we were living in the age of Gemini, and the sun was in the house of Gemini, the 2 boys. And so guess who went to the fire? The 2 boys. Just as the Bible describes, they were still doing in the Old Testament, putting their children in the fire of Molech. You have to understand too that in all of this, the sun is the fire in the equation of all of this. The sun is the fire. As I said, they are recreating the sun on earth. When they burn these animals, they are creating the house that the sun lives in. It's symbolic. You burn the bull and you create the house. You create the sun in the house of the bull. The bull is on fire. That's perfect. The bull's on fire in heaven too. The ram is on fire. Perfect, because in the heavens, the ram is on fire too. Gosh, that's the real meaning behind all of this. I hope I can really get that through to everyone. That the ram is on fire on the altar because the ram is on fire with the sun in its house. The bull is on fire on the altar because the bull is on fire with the sun in the bull's heavenly house. The children were on fire in 6300 BC until 4200 BC because the sun was in the house of the children, burning them up. So everyone was slipping their children into the fires of Molech, which they were still doing in the Bible. In the scriptures, we read it. It's doing that. And so that's human sacrifice because the sun was in the house of Gemini. That's it. But now we can't sacrifice humans. People are questioning that. I brought that up in Aquarius. Aquarius is carrying water. And maybe that's why the water is drying up all over the planet. That's our new sacrifice, is it? I don't know. But physical water is not really what that represents. It represents knowledge, energy, life-giving force. The force. But water on its face value, and is that the sacrifice we're going to have to pay? Water. We hear about Pepsi and different companies like you know water companies that are bottling water and taking water from the earth. Well, I don't know how true all that is. May not be true, but is that what we're going to pay for? Is that the type of sacrifice we're going to pay for in the age of Aquarius? We've definitely killed off all the fish. I mean, there were no fish sacrifices, but we've trolled the oceans with those long fishing nets and depleted all the fish in the ocean in the age of Pisces. You hear what I'm getting at? We're still killing not bulls, we're killing their mate, the cows, or the mate we created, the black and white animals that live in the farms. We're killing those still as a kind of respect to this age. And it's so plain to see when you really look at it. Lamb is the expensive forbidden meat because it represents the sun in the age of the Aquarius, where we are the Lamb of God. You see. Now, I'll go ahead and move on because I think that I pretty much described how the sun is celebrated because of its yearly positions. Okay? We've gone through that. And how the sun was moved from a graph to a circle. Circle graph. Okay, so let's go ahead and proceed. So the next, under the zodiac calendar year, I'm sorry. We've discussed these two in one. We've discussed that the sun, the reasons for the sacrifices are actually to make the house of the sun on earth, to come alive on earth. To make the house of the sun come alive on earth. And we discussed that the yearly sacrifices are to mark the sun's stations. So okay. So I have a bad habit of not writing in black, and it should change. We have the sacrifice, and this is for the equinoxes. Okay. Bad habit of not writing in black. Oh, sorry about that, guys. To make the sun and its house. Okay, you ready? Appear on earth. That's the first reason. That's for the equinoxes. For the yearly, to mark the friends, stations, visitations, record keeper of the sun. Okay? So the first set of sacrifices, I'm just summing up because now we're going to move on to the other type of animals that are not included in the sky, in the heavens. Okay? So the first set of heavenly, okay, these will be mental. Yeah, won't be able to fit it on there. To make the sun and its house appear on earth. When they burned the animal that the sun was living in, they recreated the sun in its house on earth. As I said, the ram was burning, so was the ram in the sky burning. Forget forgiveness of sins. That's really what it was about. And this was to mark the stations, or the friends of the house. Why I call them stations, or visitations, record keepers of the sun. Because the sun already has a house. He's in the sky. So he comes down from his 2100-year cycle down to our earth to spend the 30 days, equaling to 12 months, equaling to 4 stations. 4 main people that he hangs out with: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Okay? This is the sun in December. This is the sun in March. December, March. Son is born. He's already the lamb. Born. That is how the New Testament is divided up. Matthew is about the sun in December. Friends and stations. Matthew is the solstice. Matthew. Mark is the Passover. Luke again is the winter solstice, and John is the Passover. And this is why these books have this tense. he has a lot of time to speak in the winter. Matthew is very detailed, very long, because it's the winter solstice. He's trapped in the mind. In Mark, it's short and abrupt, and so is John. They're short and abrupt because he's in a hurry. He's got to get into summer. He's in the Passover. No birth, just straight on to the whole last 9 months. Forget the whole winter thing. So the sacrifices were to mark the equinoxes and the years. Okay? So now we're going to get into something quite different. Because like I said, the specifications were bulls, rams, but they were goats as well. Rams, bulls, there were goats, and scapegoats, and birds. And that's because it's not just the sun. And we're going to draw a line here for the sun. It was not just the sun. It was also the mind. These sacrifices were also symbolic of the mind. The goat and the birds were the mind. And I'll show you how. Okay, let's just get rid of this. So the goat was a bird has. Oh, I'm not going to be able to draw a bird, perfectly. Let's try. No, it's not a bad bird. A bird has 2 wings. Wing 1, wing 2. This is where you get politics as well, because 2 sides, 2 wings, of the bird flies the bird, right? So as the old saying goes. But in the sacrificial, this is a symbol. I'm right, of the mind. Let's say symbol of the brain, which equals to the mind. Symbol of the brain equals to the mind. Okay? So that's because the human brain is 2 hemispheres. That's really the human brain. It's encased in a skull. And it's not that drastic. I'm going to have to redraw this. That was a drastic hemispherical path, right? Let's just say there are 2 hemispheres of the brain. Kind of looks like that rock in the desert, doesn't it? And there's the left and the right. Excuse me, I keep dropping stuff. There's the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. And the left is spirit. The right, the left is animal nature. The right is spirit. And if you consider this bird, after its mind, has 2 sides as well. it has one side and another side. Right and left. So in the Old Testament, when a woman menstruated and was having that time of the month, she would bring a bird. Why? It was directly linked to premenstrual syndrome. It was linked to the emotional uprooting that premenstrual syndrome had in the days before medications were developed to alleviate the symptoms, the cramps, the touchy nature that not all women get, of course. In the Old Testament, it was instructed that if a woman was able to afford it, if she wasn't, then you would just come to the priest and ask the priest to help you, basically just, hey man, calm me down, you know. It's a present yourself before the priest. And I'm just talking about this clinically. If you were able to, though, you're supposed to bring a bird. Birdie, birdie, bird. Why? Because the bird, as I said, represents the brain. Because it has two halves. And because it dwells on high. And the human head is on high. So the human head is the bird. And the bird is the word. Right? But the women were asked to bring birds. And the priest would tear it in half. The birds were not cut. They were literally torn. Now that's pretty brutal, but I'm telling you, I'm giving you a more vegan view of this, that it was about mental. The birds were torn in half and not burned. So they had nothing to do with the sun, because they weren't burned. They were just set aside. Like the mind, to think. And what's interesting is the feathers of the birds were thrown to the east. If you are looking at Polaris, you're facing north. Polaris is how you guide yourself around the planet. The star Polaris. Everything is polarizing around it. That means it's probably the center, but it's not. But it's close enough, and you can guide yourself around with this. When you're facing Polaris, you're facing north. That puts the right hemisphere of the brain to the east. The left is to the west. When you are facing Polaris, Polaris shows you that your left hemisphere is the dead hemisphere, the set. That your left hemisphere of your brain is the set hemisphere, the uninvited hemisphere. And that the right hemisphere is facing east, the house always of the right ascender, the sun. Your right brain is the home of the sun in your head. They would take the feathers, tear the bird in half, and throw it on the ground. Dead brain. But take its tools, and throw them to the east. And cast them out to the east. In the scriptures. And that was symbolizing casting them to the right side of the brain. Casting your problems to the correct spiritual side of the brain. Casting the feathers east. Casting the thoughts. The split bird represents the split mind. The split hemispheres. One hemisphere, two hemispheres. Then the feathers are the thoughts. They're the thoughts. The feathers are the thoughts. You're supposed to cast the feathers to the east. You're supposed to cast your thoughts to the right side. You're supposed to cast your thoughts to the right side in order to be better, in order to get better, in order to think more clearly. Cast your thoughts to the right. Cut the brain, cut the bird, and cast the feathers to the right. Cut the bird, and then cast the feathers to the east. It's metaphor for you. Meditate. Cut the brain. Go in between the brain. Find the between the brain and cast the thoughts of the left brain, the mad brain, to the right brain. Cast the feathers of the birds to the east. Divide the bird by tearing it. A brain is really soft, you can tear it apart. But you have to tear your brain apart in order to think, don't you? I want to show you the metaphysical interpretation of the Bible so we can start reading this book again. This book contains all the knowledge from the ancient days wrapped up in a simplified version because people were trying to save the knowledge. And they didn't know how to save it. It's like they're getting weaker and weaker every generation. We've got a weak version, but everything's still in there. If I understood it, you can too. The animal sacrifices were not sacrifices. The birds were torn in half and the feathers cast to the east. That is a symbolic vegan instruction to divide your brain's hemispheres and cast your thoughts to the right side of your brain, to the east. Face north and cast your thoughts to the east. That way you will figure it out in your right hemisphere, which is the hemisphere that faces the rising sun. If you're facing Polaris, you are facing north. And the rising sun is naturally coming up this way over your head. It's coming up, touching the right side of your brain. Always the right side of your brain is the home of the sun, home of the pineal gland. The left side of the brain is out east. He's dead. And it is true that science has found that your left side controls your right side. Me, I'm a right-handed guy. A lot of terrible things have been done with right hands or left hands. If you're a left-handed person, then your right brain controls your left side. And you need to think about this in the exact opposite way. If you're a left-handed person, then you need to think about this in the exact opposite way that I'm teaching it. I'm teaching this for right-handers, and I should do one for left-handers, but it's just this in reverse. So for me, I have to cast the thoughts of my left brain, which control my right hand and my ability to conquer and to do things that are not really considered, or consider it, and cast it to the right side of my brain, where if I'm facing Polaris, the sun is rising into, to feed the pineal gland first, the sun dawns in the right side. The sun dawns in the right side of your brain. And if it dawns in the right side of your brain facing north, then you ought to cast everything into its dawning to see its freshest light. You can't run from the sun in the middle of the day into the left side and then be in the darkness of the left side. You have to be in the dawn of the light of the right side. So this is what this bird signifies. This is dawn. This is evening. This is Adam. AM. Okay? So that's what the bird means. Take a look at that for a minute. That's the idea of bird sacrifice. Why did they sacrifice birds? Because the bird is the symbol of the creature flying with the sun. And so what does that mean? It means that that bird is the high place. It means that that bird is signifying or symbolizing your mind. Your mind, your ability to rationalize thoughts. So the bird has to be divided. The brain has to be divided. Sacrifices have to be made. You have to divide your brain. Divide the bird. Take the thoughts of the bird and cast it to the right side, the side where the sun. Thoughts of the feathers, cast into the east. It's beautifully written. Beautifully written. East is always the side of the light. It's the side where the sun is rising. It's in the east. It rises right over our heads every day. And it's a beautiful symbol that when we face north to Polaris, the right side of your brain is on the east side where the sun is, it's on the east side and the sun is coming up. Look, you see how that passes over there? Now it's going down. See? Right and left. Face Polaris, you'll understand. Okay, so that's the birds. So let me get rid of this. Because the bird sacrifices cast your thoughts to the right side. I'm trying to save little notes here because we're getting to the end, but I don't want to erase certain things that I've written here on the backboard because the backboard is collecting these information. I should really practice writing a little smaller. That is the reason for bird sacrifice. The higher and lower thoughts deals with the mind. Here we have an illustration I've drawn of the brain and the left hemisphere being dark, right hemisphere being light. And it looks exactly like what the Egyptians would display, Egyptian sun disk it was called. And I might be able to show you an Egyptian sun disk and what that really looks like. And you can see that here there is a sort of a artist representation of the sun disk. If you look closely, you can see that it's, I've drawn the right and left hemisphere of the brain, and I've equated it with birds' wings, and the feathers are the thoughts. So if you look here, you can basically see that that's an Egyptian sun disk as well, with that same, in my opinion, that same understanding. Okay? So it's the same thing right there. Bam. So you're looking at the thoughts of your brain, Egyptian sun disk, the disk being the sun, the wings off the sun disk, dividing the brain, just as I've drawn it here. And if you look, what is also in agreement with the cast your thoughts to the right of the brain, the birds being divided in half, and the feathers being cast to the east, east representing the right side. In 1 Kings 6:8 in the Bible, 1 Kings, the book of Kings, the 1 Kings 6:8, the door to the temple is actually in the east as well. So the door to the temple is in the east, in the right side of the brain. Where the sun comes up, he enters to the door of the temple. The right side is the temple of the brain. And you literally have a temple here. This is your temple. This is your other temple. So there are two temples in your brain. The door to the temple is on the east side, not the west side. It's the east side. Just face north. The door to the temple is on the east side. Face north. Door to the temple is on the east side. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Clear thinking, dividing the mind, the bird sacrifice. Last but not least, we have the goats. And these are considered all the biological functions, because goats are earthy animals, and they're also animals that climb up real high mountains. So they span from the ground to the sky. They go from the ground to the sky. So we're talking about your biological then. So the goats now, we're talking about goats because this is birds, and these are rams, bulls. Okay? So we're talking about goats now. Goats represent mountains and they represent valleys. So that means they represent your head and they represent your feet. Sorry to draw the worst stick figure I've ever drawn, but hey, that's the way it's going down. And this person is a goat because up here is your mountain. Oops. Up here is the mountain, which is the head. And here we have the valley. So this thing is considered a goat, or the greatest of all time, right? That's what they say, the greatest of all time. The goat. You're a goat. Goats climb up mountains. Yes, they do. So we're looking at the goat as a mental and biological combined. So let me hook up my battery here. Apparently we're running low on juice. Excuse me, guys. Just give me a minute here. He's a goat. Why? Because he has valley and he has mountains. And the goat goes up and down, up and down. So a sacrificial goat is one that dies and one that's a scapegoat. One dies, one is let go. Your body has to die for your mind to be let go. So here we have the mountain goat is escape. We have the valley goat is the dead. The sacrificial one. Because it has to die. It belongs with the earthy man. Low. High. So there's a scapegoat and there's a low goat. And in the Bible, you put your hand on the head of the scapegoat. And you say prayers for the people. And you say all the sins that you heard of the people. John Doe murdered Billy Joe. Bank robbery. Old lady got run over. Nobody knew nothing. They put all of it on the head of the scapegoat. All of it. Sins. And then let it go. That's what they do with your head. Psychology. The valley goat, they killed it. No sins, nothing. They just killed it. Sacrifice. They killed the body. Spiritually and physically. This was the meaning of the sacrificial goat. Escape. Mental. Sacrifice. Is the body. Okay. So you see how that works out now? That is the meaning of sacrificing a goat. Goat is you. The high mountain, the low valleys. The low valley gets killed. The high mountain goat gets a hand put on his head. He gets sent out into the forest. It's your mind. It's not a real goat. It's what you do with yourself. So I'm teaching you a very holistic, vegan way of looking at the Bible. And you can help do that by finding more of it. By edifying. Okay? So let's go ahead and look at the word scapegoat. Because that's a pretty crazy word. So let's look at that word, scapegoat. You have the word scape, as in landscape or escape. Okay. Wait a minute. You have the word escape or scape, like or landscape. So the mountain goat was let go. He's the escape goat, going in the landscape. And then you have the word cape. You have the word cape. First you have the word cap. Cap. A way of concealing. I'm wearing a cap. The cap is also having to do with the head. Scapegoat, you put your hand on the head of the scapegoat and he escapes. He's the scapegoat. The cap. See that? It's interesting, huh? Look, at this word has so many words in it that deal with what it's saying. So you have the scapegoat, the landscape, you have the cap, concealing. You put your hand on the head, it's the cap. Your hand becomes the cap. You have ape, because you're doing this and it's about an ape, a hominid. It's for an ape. Your brain is like an ape. An ape's a monkey's brain. The monkey, control the monkey mind of the monkey mind. Monkey mind. The ape. So you have the scape, the landscape, the cap, the covering, the ape, the monkey mind, the cap for the ape. Look at that. The cap for the ape. The peg is the high place. You follow me? The peg is the high place where you get rid of the ego. And in order to get rid of the ego, you have to go. You gotta go. And when you go, people will wonder where you're at. So look at how many words we have in scapegoat that even refer to what the thing is supposed to be. You're a scapegoat. You're escaping. You escape. Your escape. Running through the landscape with a cap on as the ignorant ape trying to find the high peg where you can hang your ego. You gotta go. And people are wondering where you're at. You're the scapegoat. Check that out. You gotta escape. You're going through the landscape. You need a cap on your head. Okay, I'm sorry, you need I didn't do this. You need a cape. Oh, I put 8 before cape. I forgot one. Cape. That one is important too. And a cape. Right? I'm sorry I forgot about that. So you're the scapegoat. You're going your escape through the landscape with a cap on and a cape. I forgot the cape. You become an ape. It's like you're like an ape looking for the high place to hang your ego. And you go. You keep going. People wonder where you're at. Scapegoat. Take a look at that for a minute. Take a gander. Take a gander at Pymander. Well, my friends, I'm going to turn over this board because we're coming to an end here. So we've pretty much discussed that the end result of all of this stuff, of the big sacrifices, is to create the light of the sun on earth in his house. The sun is in Taurus, they will burn a bull. The bull is on the altar being burned, great, because the sun is in the heavens the sun's in the heavens burning the heavenly bull. Same with the ram. The birds and the goats are more psychological. These are psychological signs. The higher and lower thoughts of the mind. Psychological control. Left brain, right brain awareness. Biological functions. That's because the bird represents the right brain and the left brain. Okay? Birds cast your thoughts to the right side of the brain. When the sacrifices happened, they broke the bird in half, cast the feathers to the right. The right is the east, because you're facing Polaris, your brain's on the right side. That's the east, where the sun comes into the temple. You cast your thoughts, your feathers, to the right side, to the east, to think clearly. And the goat is the landscape, the man, the whole man. You got the mountain, you got the feet. And the goat runs up and down a mountain. So the valley goats die. This is the low light. This is the low light here. The valley goats must die. That low stuff must die. Those low thoughts. And these are the high thoughts. Those high thoughts must live. The mountain goats must go. He must be let go. Even though there are sins, he must be let to live. They must let him live, because that's the mind. But this must die. No question. Must be sacrificed. He is the scapegoat. The escape, landscape, wearing a cap, wearing a cape, like an ape, looking for the peg to hang your ego, and you keep going and people wonder where you're at because you're a scapegoat. And my friends, that's really the end result here of all of this. All of this is done both because of and symbolizing the older ages and the old gods. Period. All this sacrifice of bulls and rams were done signifying the older 2100 year cycles and the ages of the gods. Human sacrifice ended because the age of Gemini was ended. Bull sacrifice ended. Ram sacrifice. We have no laws for fish because they thought at the end of Aries the sun would rest and it'd be the end of the world. So they didn't write laws for fish. We didn't have any sacrifice of fish for 2,000 years or any sacrifices. There's your reason. Okay? So what I want to finish with is Isaiah chapter 1. And I want to give a quick reading of Isaiah chapter 1, which I think is pertinent to what we're studying now, because it really says that the prophet was given the message that God really did not require these sacrifices, that the sacrifices were not really required. So it says here in Isaiah chapter 1:11, and God is speaking through the prophet. He says, "To what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices to me, saith the Lord? I'm full of burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fed beasts. And I delight not in the blood of bullocks or of lambs or of he-goats. When you come to appear before me, who has required this at your hand to tread in my courts? Bring no more vain obligations, no more vain oblations. Incense is an abomination to me. The new moons and the Sabbaths, the calling of assemblies, I away with it. It's iniquity. Even the solemn meeting, your new moons and your appointed feasts, my soul hates that. They are a trouble to me. I'm weary to bear them. And when you spread forth your hands, I will hide my hands from you. I will hide my eyes from you. When you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands will be full. Your hands are full of blood. Okay? Wash yourself. Put away the evil of your doings before my eyes. Cease to do evil. Learn to do well. Seek judgment. Relieve the oppressed. Judge the fathers. Plead for the widow. Come now, let us reason together, saith the Lord. Though your sins be like scarlet, they shall be white as snow. Though they be red as crimson, they shall be as wool. And this is why I am telling you that bloody stuff was a mistake. And I'm glad it stopped, but we have to rid ourselves of the idea of building a temple for more sacrifices. The temple is in you. It is your brain, the two hemispheres of your brain. And you must develop that, okay? So for Sevenaria, I want to say thanks again for joining me for another video. Again, another session, long session, 3 hours. Hope you guys hung in there. Thanks again. Please sign up and follow me on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube if you can. Okay, I really would appreciate some subscribers. Okay, and so appreciate it tonight. It was the 12th lesson. Remember this little glyph I drew here. I'm going to save that glyph. It means a lot. All right. So you guys, thanks so much for joining me tonight. I am Israel Joseph I, the founder, dean, director, and professor here at Sevenaria University, and I thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back with another video real soon, and we'll do this again, okay? Until then, you guys be really well. May the sun always shine on you, and always light your way, and always show you where and what to do, and always give you guidance. In the name of the Creator, all right? Peace and love, y'all. Peace and love all over the earth. One love, understanding, and blessings.